Welcome to the presentation of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, a radio play, written by Jules Verne. Please take a moment to locate the nearest exit in the unlikely event of an emergency. Please note that the nearest emergency exit may not be the door in which you entered. Please silence and turn off all cellular devices. Our show runs approximately 1 hour with no intermission. Enjoy the presentation.
The year 1866 was signalized by a remarkable incident, a mysterious and puzzling phenomenon which, doubtless, no one has yet forgotten, not to mention rumors which agitated the maritime population and excited the public mind. Merchants, common sailors, captains of vessels, skippers, both of Europe and America, naval officers of all countries, and the governments of several states on the two continents were deeply interested in the matter. For some time past, vessels had been met by an enormous thing, a long object, spindle-shaped, occasionally phosphorescent, and infinitely larger and more rapid in its movements than a whale. The facts relating to this apparition agreed in most respects as to the shape of the object or creature in question, the untiring rapidity of its movements, its surprising power of locomotion, and the peculiar life with which it seemed endowed. If it was a cetacean, it surpassed in size all those hitherto classified in science. Taking into consideration the mean of observations made, we might fairly conclude that this mysterious being surpassed greatly all dimensions emitted by the ichthyologists of the day, if it existed at all. And that it did exist was an undeniable fact. And, with that tendency which disposes the human mind in favor of the marvelous, we can understand the excitement produced in the entire world by this supernatural apparition. As to classing it in a list of fables, the idea was out of the question. Now it was the monster who, justly or unjustly, was accused of the disappearance of many seamen, and, thanks to it, communication between the different continents became more and more dangerous. The public demanded peremptorily that the seas should, at any price, be relieved from this formidable cetacean.
Be quiet, Master Land! And you, Professor, will you be so good as to listen to me?
It was the commander of the vessel who thus spoke. At these words, Ned Land rose suddenly. The steward, nearly strangled, tottered out on a sign from his master, but such was the power of the commander on board that not a gesture betrayed the resentment which this man must have felt towards the Canadian. CONSEIL, interested in spite of himself, I stupefied, awaited in silence the result of this scene. The commander, leaning against the corner of a table with his arms folded, scanned us with profound attention. Did he hesitate to speak? One might almost think so. After some moments of silence, which not one of us dreamed of breaking, the stranger said,
Gentlemen, I speak French, English, German, and Latin especially well. I could therefore have answered you at our first interview, but I wish to know you first, then reflect. The story told by each one, entirely agreeing in the main points, convinced me of your identity. I know now that chance has brought before me Major Pierre ARONNAX, Professor of Natural History at the Museum of Paris, entrusted with scientific mission abroad. CONSEIL, his servant, and Ned Land, of Canadian origin, harpooner on board the frigate Abraham Lincoln on the Navy of the United States of America.
I bowed assent. It was not a question that the commander put to me. Therefore, there was no answer to be made. This man expressed himself with perfect ease, without any accent. His sentences were well-turned, his words clear, and his fluency of speech remarkable. Yet I did not recognize in him a fellow countryman. He continued the conversation in these terms.
You have doubtless, though, sir, that I have delayed long in paying you this second visit. The reason is that, your identity recognized, I wish to weigh maturely what part to act towards you. I've hesitated much most annoying circumstances has brought you into the presence of a man who has broken all ties of humanity. You have come to trouble my existence.
Unintentionally.
Unintentionally? Was it unintentional that the Abraham Lincoln pursued me all over the seas? Was it unintentional that you took passage in this frigate? Was it unintentional that your cannonballs rebound off the plating of my vessel? Was it unintentional that Mr. Ned Land struck me with his harpoon?
I detected a restrained irritation in these words. But to these recriminations I had a very natural answer to make, and I made it.
Sir, no doubt you're ignorant of the discussions which have taken place concerning you in America and Europe. You do not know that divers accidents caused by collisions with your submarine machine have excited public feeling in the two continents. I omit the hypotheses without number by which it was sought to explain the inexplicable phenomenon of which you alone possess the secret, but you must understand that in pursuing you over the high seas of the Pacific, the Abraham Lincoln believed itself to be chasing some powerful sea monster of which it was necessary to rid the ocean of at any price.
A half-smile curled the lips of the commander. Then, in a calmer tone, he replied,
Monsieur ARONNAX, dare you affirm that your frigate would not as soon have pursued and cannonaded a submarine boat as a monster?
This question embarrassed me, for certainly Captain Farragut might not have hesitated. He might have thought it his duty to destroy a contrivance of this kind, as he would a gigantic narwhal.
You understand then, sir,
Continued the stranger,
that I have the right to treat you as an enemy?
I answered nothing, purposely. For what good would it be to discuss such a proposition when force could destroy the best arguments?
I've hesitated for some time. Nothing obliged me to show you hospitality. If I chose to separate myself from you, I should have no interest in seeing you again. I could place you upon the deck of this vessel, which has served you as refuge. I could sink beneath the waters and forget you have ever existed. Would that not be my right?
It might be the right of a savage, but not that of a civilized man.
Professor, I'm not what you call a civilized man. I've done with society entirely, for reasons which I alone have the right of appreciating. I do not therefore obey its laws, and I desire you never allude to them before me again.
This was said plainly. A flash of anger and disdain kindled in the eyes of the unknown, and I had a glimpse of a terrible past in the life of this man. Not only had he put himself beyond the pale of human laws, but he had made himself independent of them, free in the strictest acceptation of the word, quite beyond their reach. Who would dare to pursue him at the bottom of the sea when, on its surface, he defied all attempts made against him? What vessel could resist the shock of his submarine monitor? What cuirass, however thick, could withstand the blows of his spur? No man could demand from him an account of his actions. God, if he believed in one, his conscience, if he had one, were the sole judges to whom he was answerable. These reflections crossed my mind rapidly, whilst the stranger personage was silent, absorbed, and as if wrapped up in himself. I regarded him with fear, mingled with interest, as doubtless Oedipus regarded the Sphinx. After a rather long silence, the commander resumed the conversation.
You will remain on board my vessel, since fate has cast you there. You will be free, and in exchange for this liberty, I shall only impose one single condition. Your word of honor to submit to it will suffice.
Speak, sir. I suppose this condition is one which a man of honor may accept.
Yes, sir. It is this. It is possible that certain events, unforeseen, may oblige me to consign you to your cabins for some hours or some days, as the case may be. As I desire never to use violence, I expect from you, more than all others, a passive obedience. In thus acting, I take all the responsibility. I acquit you entirely, for I make it an impossibility for you to see what ought not to be seen. Do you accept this condition?
Then things took place on board which, to say the least, were singular, and which ought not to be seen by people who were not placed beyond the pale of social laws. Amongst the surprises which the future was preparing for me, this might not be the least.
We accept. Only I will ask your permission, sir, to address one question to you. One only.
Speak, sir.
You said that we should be free on board.
Entirely.
I ask you then what you mean by this liberty.
Just the liberty to go, to come, to see, to observe even all that passes here. Save under rare circumstances, the liberty, in short, which we enjoy ourselves, my companions and I.
It was evident that we did not understand one another.
Pardon me, sir, but this liberty is only what every prisoner has of pacing his prison. It cannot suffice us.
It must suffice you, however.
What? We must renounce forever seeing our country, our friends, our relations again?
Yes, sir. But to renounce that unendurable worldly yoke which men believe to be liberty is not perhaps so painful as you think.
Well, never will I give my word of honor not to try to escape.
I did not ask you for your word of honor, Master Land.
Sir, you abuse your situation towards us. It is cruelty.
No, sir, it is clemency. You are my prisoners of war. I keep you when I could, by a word, plunge you into the depths of the ocean. You attacked me. You came to surprise a secret which no man in the world must penetrate, the secret of my whole existence. And you think that I am going to send you back to the world which must know me no more? Never! In retaining you, it is not you whom I guard. It is myself.
These words indicated a resolution taken on the part of the commander, against which no arguments would prevail.
So, sir, you give us simply the choice between life and death.
Simply.
My friends, to a question thus put, there is nothing to answer. But no word of honor binds us to the master of this vessel.
None, sir. Now, permit me to finish what I have to say to you. I know you, Monsieur ARONNAX. You and your companions will not, perhaps, have so much to complain of in the chance which has bound you to my fate. You will find amongst the books which are my favorite study the work which you have published on, The Depths of the Sea. I have often read it. You have carried out your work as far as the terrestrial science permitted you, but you do not know all. You've not seen all. Let me tell you then, Professor, you will not regret the time passed on board my vessel. You are going to visit the land of marvels.
These words of the commander had a great effect upon me. I cannot deny it. My weak point was touched, and I forgot, for a moment, that the contemplation of these sublime subjects was not worth the loss of liberty. Besides, I trusted to the future to decide this grave question, so I contented myself with saying,
By what name ought I to address you?
Sir, I am nothing to you but Captain Nemo, and you and your companions are nothing to me but the passengers of the Nautilus.
Captain Nemo called.
Steward!
A steward appeared. The captain gave him his orders in that strange language which I did not understand.
Take them to their cabins.
Then, turning towards the Canadian CONSEIL,
A repast awaits you in your cabin. Be so good as to follow this man. And now, Monsieur ARONNAX, our breakfast is ready. Permit me to lead the way.
I am at your service, Captain.
I followed Captain Nemo, and as soon as I had passed through the door, I found myself in a kind of passage lighted by electricity, similar to the waist of a ship. After we had proceeded a dozen yards, a second door opened before me. I then entered a dining room, decorated and furnished in severe taste. High oaken sideboards, inlaid with ebony, stood at the two extremities of the room, and upon their shelves glittered china, porcelain, and glass of inestimable value. The plate on the table sparkled in the rays which the luminous ceiling shed around, while the light was tempered and softened by exquisite paintings. In the center of the room was a table richly laid out. Captain Nemo indicated the place I was to occupy. The breakfast consisted of a certain number of dishes, the contents of which were furnished by the sea alone, and I was ignorant of the nature and mode of preparation of some of them. I acknowledged that they were good, but they had a peculiar flavor, which I easily became accustomed to. These different ailments appeared to me to be rich in phosphorus, and I thought they must have a marine origin. Captain Nemo looked at me. I asked him no questions, but he guessed my thoughts, and answered of his own accord the questions which I was burning to address to him.
The greater part of these dishes are unknown to you. However, you may partake of them without fear. They are wholesome and nourishing. For a long time I've renounced the food of the earth, and I'm never ill now. My crew, who are healthy, are fed on the same food.
So, all these eatables are the produce of the sea?
Yes, Professor. The sea supplies all my wants. Sometimes I cast my nets in tow, and draw them in when they're ready to break. Sometimes I hunt in the midst of this element, which appears to be inaccessible to man, and quarry the game which dwells in my submarine forests. My flocks, like those of Neptune's old shepherds, graze fearlessly in the immense prairies of the ocean. I have a vast property there, which I cultivate myself, and which is always sown by the hand of the Creator of all things.
I can understand perfectly, sir, that your nets furnish excellent fish for your table. I can understand also that you hunt aquatic game in your submarine forests. But I cannot understand at all how a particle of meat, no matter how small, can figure in your bill of fare.
This, which you believe to be meat, Professor, is nothing else but fillet of turtle. Here are also some dolphin livers, which you take to be ragout of pork. My cook is a clever fellow who excels in dressing these various products of the sea. Taste all these dishes. Here is preserved holothria, which a Malay would declare to be unrivaled in the world. Here is a cream of which milk has been furnished by the cetacea, and the sugar by the great fucus of the North Sea. And lastly, permit me to offer you some preserve of anemones, which is equal to that of the most delicious fruits.
I tasted, more from curiosity than as a connoisseur, whilst Captain Nemo enchanted me with his extraordinary story.
You like the sea, Captain?
Yes, I love it. The sea is everything. It covers 7/10 of the terrestrial globe. Its breath is pure and healthy. It is in an immense desert where man is never lonely, for he feels life stirring on all sides. The sea is only the embodiment of the supernatural and wonderful existence. It is nothing but love and emotion. It is the living infinity, as one of your poets said. In fact, Professor, nature manifests itself in it by her three kingdoms: mineral, vegetable, and animal. The sea is the vast reservoir of nature. The globe began with the sea, so to speak, and who knows if it will not end with it. In it is supreme tranquility. The sea does not belong to despots. Upon its surface, men can still exercise unjust laws, fight, tear one another to pieces, and be carried away with terrestrial horrors. But at 30 feet below its level, their reign ceases. Their influence is quenched and their power disappears. Sir, live in the bosom of the waters. There only is independence. There I recognize no masters. There I am free.
Captain Nemo suddenly became silent in the midst of this enthusiasm, by which he was quite carried away. For a few moments he paced up and down, much agitated. Then he became more calm, regained his accustomed coldness of expression, and turning towards me,
Now, Professor, if you wish to go over the Nautilus, I am at your service.
Captain Nemo rose. I followed him. A double door, contrived at the back of the dining room, opened, and I entered a room equal in dimensions to that which I had just quitted. It was a library. High pieces of furniture, of black-violet ebony, inlaid with brass, supported upon their wide shelves a great number of books uniformly bound. They followed the shape of the room, terminating at the lower part in huge divans, covered with brown leather, which were curved to afford the greatest comfort. Light movable desks, made to slide in and out at will, allowed one to rest one's book while reading. In the center stood an immense table covered with pamphlets, amongst which were some newspapers already of old date. The electric light flooded everything. It was shed from 4 unpolished globes half sunk in at the volutes of the ceiling. I looked with real admiration at this room, so ingeniously fitted up, and I could scarcely believe my eyes.
Captain Nemo,
Said I to my host, who had just thrown himself on one of the divans.
this is a library which would do honor to more than one of the continental palaces, and I am absolutely astounded when I consider that it can follow you to the bottom of the seas.
Where could one find greater solitude or silence, Professor? Did your study in the museum afford you such a perfect quiet?
No, sir. And I must confess that it is a very poor one after yours. You must have 6,000 or 7,000 volumes here.
20,000, Monsieur ARONNAX. These are the only ties which bind me to the earth. But I have done with the world on the day my Nautilus plunged for the first time beneath the waters. That day, I bought my last volumes, my last pamphlets, my last papers, and from that time I wish to think that men no longer think aright. These books, Professor, are at your service besides, and you can make use of them freely.
I thanked Captain Nemo and went up to the shelves of the library. Works on science, morals, and literature abounded in every language, but I did not see one single work on political economy. That subject appeared to be strictly prescribed. Strange to say, all these books were irregularly arranged, in whatever language they were written, and this medley proved that the captain of the Nautilus must have read indiscriminately the books which he took up by chance.
Sir, I thank you for having placed this library at my disposal. It contains treasures of science, and I shall profit by them.
This room is not only a library, it's also a smoking room.
A smoking room? Then one may smoke on board.
Certainly.
Then, sir, I am forced to believe that you have kept up a communication with Havana.
Not any. Except this cigar, Monsieur ARONNAX. And though it does not come from Havana, you will be pleased with it, if you are a connoisseur.
I took the cigar which was offered me. Its shape recalled the London ones, but it seemed to be made of leaves of gold. I lighted it at a little brazier, which was supported upon an elegant bronze stem, and drew the first whiffs with the delight of a lover of smoking who has not smoked for 2 days.
It is excellent, but it is not tobacco.
No, this tobacco comes neither from Havana nor the East. It's a kind of seaweed, rich in nicotine, with which the sea provides me, but somewhat sparingly.
At that moment, Captain Nemo opened a door which stood opposite to that by which I had entered the library, and I passed into an immense drawing room splendidly lighted. It was a vast, 4-sided room, 30 feet long, 18 wide, and 15 high. A luminous ceiling, decorated with light arabesques, shed a soft, clear light over all the marvels accumulated in this museum. For it was, in fact, a museum, in which an intelligent and prodigal hand had gathered all the treasures of nature and art, with the artistic confusion which distinguishes a painter's studio. 30 first-rate pictures, uniformly framed, separated by bright drapery, ornamented the walls, which were hung with tapestry of severe design. I saw works of great value, the greater part of which I had admired in the special collections of Europe and in the exhibitions of paintings. Amongst the works of modern painters were some admirable statues in marble and bronze, after the finest antique models which stood upon pedestals in the corners of this magnificent museum. Amazement, as the captain of the Nautilus had predicted, had already begun to take possession of me.
Professor, you must excuse the unceremonious way in which I receive you, and the disorder in this room.
Sir, without seeking to know who you are, I recognize in you an artist.
An amateur, nothing more, sir. Formerly, I loved to collect these beautiful works created by the hand of man. In my eyes, your modern artists are already old. They have 2,000 or 3,000 years of existence. I confound them in my own mind. Masters have no age. These are my last souvenirs of the world which is dead to me.
And these musicians?
Said I, pointing out some works scattered over a large model piano organ which occupied one of the panels of the drawing room.
These musicians, the contemporaries of Orpheus. For in the memory of the dead, all chronological differences are effaced. And I am dead, Professor. As much dead as those of your friends who are sleeping 6 feet under the earth.
Captain Nemo was silent and seemed lost in a profound reverie. I contemplated him with deep interest, analyzing in silence the strange expression of his countenance. Leaning on his elbow against an angle of a costly mosaic table, he no longer saw me. He had forgotten my presence. I did not disturb this reverie, and continued my observation of the curiosities which enriched this drawing room. Under elegant glass cases, fixed by copper rivets, were classed and labeled the most precious productions of the sea which had ever been presented to the eye of a naturalist. My delight as a professor may be conceived. A somewhat nervous conchologist would certainly have fainted before other, more numerous cases, in which were classified the specimens of mollusks. Apart, in separate compartments, were spread out chaplets of pearls of the greatest beauty, which reflected the electric light in little sparks of fire. Pink pearls torn from the pinna marina of the Red Sea, green pearls of the haliotide iris, yellow, blue, and black pearls, the curious productions of the divers mollusks of every ocean, and certain mussels of the watercourses of the north. Lastly, several specimens of inestimable value, which had been gathered from the rarest pintadines. Some of these pearls were larger than a pigeon's egg, and were worth as much, and more than that which the traveler Tavernier sold to the Shah of Persia for 3 millions, and surpassed the one in possession of the Imam of Muscat, which I had to believe to be unrivaled in the world. Therefore, to estimate the value of this collection was simply impossible. Captain Nemo must have expended millions in the acquirement of these various specimens, and I was thinking what source he could have drawn from to have been able thus to gratify his fancy for collecting, when I was interrupted by these words.
You're examining my shells, Professor? They must be interesting to a naturalist. But for me, they have a far greater charm, for I've collected all of them with my own hand. And there is not a sea on the surface of the globe which has escaped my researches.
I can understand, Captain, the delight of wandering about in the midst of such riches. You are one of those who have collected their treasures themselves.
No museum in Europe possesses such a collection of the produce of the ocean.
But if I exhaust all my admiration upon it, I shall have none left for the vessel which carries it. I do not wish to pry into your secrets, but I must confess that this Nautilus, with the motive power which is confined in it, the contrivances which enable it to be worked, the powerful agent which propels it, all excite my curiosity to the highest pitch. I see suspended on the walls of this room instruments of whose use I am ignorant.
You will find these same instruments in my own room, Professor, where I shall have much pleasure in explaining their use to you. But first, come and inspect the cabin which sets you apart for your own use. You must see how you will be accommodated on board the Nautilus.
I followed Captain Nemo, who, by one of the doors opening from each panel of the drawing room, regained the waist. He conducted me towards the bow, and there I found not a cabin, but an elegant room with a bed, dressing table, and several other pieces of furniture. I could only thank my host. For several days, the Nautilus kept off from the American coast. Evidently, it did not wish to risk the tides of the Gulf of Mexico or of the Sea of the Antilles. April 16th, we sighted Martinique and Guadeloupe from a distance of about 30 miles. I saw their tall peaks for an instant. The Canadian, who counted on carrying out his projects in the Gulf by either landing or hailing one of the numerous boats that coast from one island to another, was quite disheartened. Flight would have been quite practicable if Ned Land had been able to take possession of the boat without the captain's knowledge, but in the open sea it could not be thought of. The Canadian, CONSEIL, and I had a long conversation on this subject. For 6 months we had been prisoners on board the Nautilus. We had traveled 17,000 leagues, and, as Ned Land said, there was no reason why it should come to an end. We could hope nothing from the captain of the Nautilus, but only from ourselves. Besides, for some time past he had become graver, more retired, less sociable. He seemed to shun me. I met him rarely. Formerly, he was pleased to explain the submarine marvels to me. Now he left me to my studies, and came no more to the saloon. What change had come over him? For what cause? For my part, I did not wish to bury with me my curious and novel studies. I had now the power to write the true book of the sea, and this book, sooner or later, I wished to see daylight. The land nearest us was the archipelago of the Bahamas. There rose high submarine cliffs covered with large weeds. It was about 11 o'clock when Ned Land drew my attention to a formidable pricking, like the sting of an ant, which was produced by means of large seaweeds.
Well, these are proper caverns for Poulps, and I should not be astonished to see some of these monsters.
What? Cuttlefish, real cuttlefish of the cephalopod class?
No, Poulps of huge dimensions.
I'll never believe that such animals exist.
Well, I remember perfectly to have seen a large vessel drawn under the waves by an octopus's arm.
You saw that?
Yes, Ned.
With your own eyes?
With my own eyes.
Where, pray, might that be?
At St. Malo.
In the port?
Oh, in a church.
In a church!
Yes, friend Ned, in a picture representing the pulp in question.
Good.
He is quite right. I have heard of this picture, but the subject represented is taken from a legend, and you know what to think of legends in the matter of natural history. Besides, when it is a question of monsters, the imagination is apt to run wild. Not only is it supposed that these Poulps can draw down vessels, but a certain Olaus Magnus speaks of an octopus a mile long that is more like an island than an animal. It is also said that the Bishop of Nidros was building an altar on an immense rock. Mass finished. The rock began to walk and returned to the sea. The rock was a Poulp. Another bishop, Pontoppidan, speaks also of a Poulp on which a regiment of cavalry could maneuver. Lastly, the ancient naturalists speak of monsters whose mouths were like gulfs, and which were too large to pass through the Straits of Gibraltar.
But how much is true of these stories?
Nothing, my friends, at least of that which passes the limit of truth to get to fable or legend. Nevertheless, there must be some ground for the imagination of the storytellers. One cannot deny that Poulps and cuttlefish exist of a large species, inferior, however, to the cetaceans. Aristotle has stated that the dimensions of a cuttlefish as 5 cubits, or 9 feet 2 inches. Our fishermen frequently see some that are more than 4 feet long. Some skeletons of Poulps are preserved in the museums of Trieste that measure 2 yards in length. Besides, according to the calculations of some naturalists, one of these animals only 6 feet long would have tentacles 27 feet long. That would suffice to make a formidable monster.
Do they fish for them in these days?
If they do not fish for them, sailors see them at least. One of my friends, Captain Paul Beauhavre, has often affirmed that he met one of these monsters of colossal dimensions in the Indian seas, but the most astonishing fact, and which does not permit of the denial of the existence of these gigantic animals, happened some years ago in 1861.
What is the fact?
This is it. In 1861, to the northeast of Tenerife, very nearly in the same latitude we are now, the crew of the dispatch boat Elector perceived a monstrous cuttlefish swimming in the waters. Captain Boguer went near to the animal and attacked it with harpoon and guns, without much success, for balls and harpoons glided over the sloth's flesh. After several fruitless attempts, the crew tried to pass a slip knot round the body of the mollusk. The noose slipped as far as the tail fins and there stopped. They tried then to haul it on board, but its weight was so considerable that the tightness of the cord separated the tail from the body, and, deprived of this ornament, he disappeared under the water.
Indeed. Is that a fact?
An indisputable fact, my good Ned. They proposed to name this Poulp Boguer's cuttlefish.
What length was it?
Did it not measure about 6 yards?
Said Conseil, who, posted at the window, was examining again the irregular windings of the cliff.
Precisely.
Its head, was it not crowned with 8 tentacles that beat the water like a nest of serpents?
Precisely.
Had not its eyes, placed at the back of its head, considerable development?
Yes, Conseil.
And was not its mouth like a parrot's beak?
Exactly, Conseil.
Very well. No offense to Master... If this is not Boguer's cuttlefish, it is, at least, one of its brothers.
I looked at Conseil. Ned Land hurried to the window.
What a horrible beast!
I looked in my turn and could not repress a gesture of disgust. Before my eyes was a horrible monster worthy to figure in the legends of the marvelous. It was an immense cuttlefish, being 8 yards long. It swam crossways in the direction of the Nautilus with great speed, watching us with its enormous, staring green eyes. Its 8 arms, or rather feet, fixed to its head, that have given the name of the cephalopod to these animals, were twice as long as its body, and were twisted like the Fury's hair. One could see the hundreds of air holes on the inner side of the tentacles. The monster's mouth, a horned beak like a parrot's, opened and shut vertically. Its tongue, a horned substance, furnished with several rows of pointed teeth, came out quivering from this veritable pair of shears. What a freak of nature! A bird's beak on a mollusk. Its spindle-like body formed a fleshy mass that might weigh 4,000 to 5,000 pounds. The varying color, changing with great rapidity according to the irritation of the animal, passed successively from livid gray to reddish-brown. What irritated this mollusk? No doubt the presence of the nautilus, more formidable than itself, and on which its suckers or its jaws had no hold. Yet, what monsters these poulps are! What vitality the Creator has given them! What vigor in their movements! Chance had brought us in the presence of this cuttlefish, and I did not wish to lose the opportunity of carefully studying this specimen of cephalopods. I overcame the horror that inspired me, and, taking a pencil, began to draw it.
Perhaps this is the same which the Elector saw.
No, for this is whole, and the other had lost its tail.
That is no reason. The arms and tails of these animals are reformed by renewal, and in 7 years, the tail of Bogaire's cuttlefish has no doubt had time to grow.
By this time, other poulps appeared to be at the portlight. I counted 7. They formed a procession after the Nautilus, and I heard their beaks gnashing against the iron hull. I continued my work. These monsters kept in the water with such precision that they seemed immovable. Suddenly, the Nautilus stopped. A shock made it tremble in every place.
Have we struck anything?
In any case, we shall be free, but we are floating.
The Nautilus was floating, no doubt, but it did not move. A minute passed. Captain Nemo, followed by his lieutenant, entered the drawing room. I had not seen him for some time. He seemed dull. Without noticing or speaking to us, he went to the panel, looked at the Poulps, and said something to his lieutenant. The latter went out. Soon, the panels were shut. The ceiling was lighted. I went towards the captain.
A curious collection of pulps.
Yes, indeed, Mr. Naturalist, and we are going to fight them, man to beast.
I looked at him. I thought I had not heard right.
Man to beast?
Yes, sir, the screw has stopped. I think that the jaws of one of the cuttlefish is entangled in the blades. That is preventing our moving.
What are you going to do?
Rise to the surface and slaughter this vermin.
A difficult enterprise.
Yes, indeed. The electric bullets are powerless against soft flesh, where they do not find resistance enough to go off. But we shall attack them with the hatchet.
And the harpoon, sir, if you do not refuse my help.
I will accept it, Master Land.
We will follow you,
I said, and, following Captain Nemo, we went towards the central staircase. There, about 10 men with boarding hatchets were ready for the attack. Conseil and I took 2 hatchets. Ned Land seized a harpoon. The Nautilus had then risen to the surface. One of the sailors, posted on the top ladder step, unscrewed the bolts of the panels. But hardly were the screws loosed when the panel rose with great violence, evidently drawn by the suckers of a Poulp's arm. Immediately, one of these arms slid like a serpent down the opening, and 20 others were above. With one blow of the axe, Captain Nemo cut this formidable tentacle that slid wriggling down the ladder. Just as we were pressing one on the other to reach the platform, 2 other arms, lashing the air, came down on the seamen placed before Captain Nemo and lifted him up with irresistible power. Captain Nemo uttered a cry and rushed out. We hurried after him. What a scene! The unhappy man, seized by the tentacle and fixed to the suckers, was balanced in the air at the caprice of this enormous trunk. He rattled in his throat. He was stifled, and he cried, "Help! Help!" These words, spoken in French, startled me. I had a fellow countryman on board, perhaps several. That heart-rending cry, I shall hear it all my life. The unfortunate man was lost. Who could rescue him from that powerful pressure? However, Captain Nemo had rushed to the pole, and with one blow of the axe had cut through one arm. His lieutenant struggled furiously against other monsters that crept on the flanks of the Nautilus. The crew fought with their axes. The Canadian, Conseil, and I buried our weapons in the fleshy masses. A strong smell of musk penetrated the atmosphere. It was horrible. For one instant, I thought the unhappy man, entangled with the pulp, would be torn from its powerful suction. 7 of the 8 arms had been cut off. One only wriggled in the air, brandishing the victim like a feather. But just as Captain Nemo and his lieutenant threw themselves on it, the animal ejected a stream of black liquid. We were blinded with it. When the cloud dispersed, the cuttlefish had disappeared, and my unfortunate countrymen with it. 10 or 12 Poulps now invaded the platform and sides of the Nautilus. We rolled pell-mell into the midst of this nest of serpents that wriggled on the platform in the waves of blood and ink. It seemed as though these slimy tentacles sprang up like the Hydra's heads. Ned Land's harpoon, at each stroke, was plunged into the staring eyes of the cuttlefish, but my bold companion was suddenly overturned by the tentacles of a monster he had not been able to avoid. Ah, how my heart beat with emotion and horror. The formidable beak of a cuttlefish was open over Ned Land. The unhappy man would be cut in two. I rushed to his succor, but Captain Nemo was before me. His axe disappeared between the two enormous jaws, and, miraculously saved, the Canadian, rising, plunged his harpoon deep into the triple heart.
I owed myself this revenge.
Ned bowed without replying. The combat had lasted a quarter of an hour. The monsters, vanquished and mutilated, left us at last and disappeared under the waves. Captain Nemo, covered with blood, nearly exhausted, gazed upon the sea that had swallowed up one of his companions, and great tears gathered in his eyes. The next day I woke with my head singularly clear. To my great surprise, I was in my own room. My companions, no doubt, had been reinstated in their cabin without having perceived it any more than I. Of what had passed during the night, they were as ignorant as I was, and to penetrate this mystery, I only reckoned upon the chances of the future. I then thought of quitting my room. Was I free again, or a prisoner? Quite free. I opened the door, went to the half-deck, went up the central stairs. The panels, shut the evening before, were open. I went on to the platform. Ned Land and Conseil waited there for me. I questioned them. They knew nothing. Lost in a heavy sleep in which they had been totally unconscious, they had been astonished at finding themselves in their cabin. As for the Nautilus, it seemed quiet and mysterious as ever. It floated on the surface of the waves at a moderate pace. Nothing seemed changed on board. The second lieutenant then came onto the platform and gave the usual order below. As for Captain Nemo, he did not appear. Of the people on board, I only saw the impassive steward, who served me with his usual dumb regularity. About 2 o'clock, I was in the drawing-room, busied in arranging my notes, when the captain opened the door and appeared. I bowed. He made a slight inclination in return, without speaking. I resumed my work, hoping he would perhaps give me some explanation of the events of the preceding night. He made none. I looked at him. He seemed fatigued. His heavy eyes had not been refreshed by sleep. His face looked very sorrowful. He walked to and fro, sat down and got up again, took a chance book, put it down, consulted his instruments without taking his habitual notes, and seemed restless and uneasy. At last he came up to me and said,
Are you a doctor, Monsieur ARONNAX?
I so little expected such a question that I stared some time at him without answering.
Are you a doctor? Several of your colleagues have studied medicine.
Well, I am a doctor and resident surgeon to the hospital. I practiced several years before entering the museum.
Very well, sir.
My answer had evidently satisfied the captain, but not knowing what he would say next, I waited for other questions, reserving my answers according to circumstances.
Monsieur ARONNAX, will you consent to prescribe one of my men?
Is he ill?
Yes.
I am ready to follow you.
Come, then.
I own my heartbeat. I do not know why. I saw a certain connection between the illness of one of the crew and the events of the day before, and this mystery interested me at least as much as the sick man. Captain Nemo conducted me to the back of the Nautilus and took me into a cabin situated near the sailors' quarters. There, on a bed, lay a man about 40 years of age, with a resolute expression of countenance, a true type of Anglo-Saxon. I leaned over him. He was not only ill, he was wounded. His head, swathed in bandages covered with blood, lay on a pillow. I undid the bandages, and the wounded man looked at me with his large eyes and gave no sign of pain as I did it. It was a horrible wound. The skull, shattered by some deadly weapon, left the brain exposed, which was much injured. Clots of blood had formed in the bruised and broken mass, the color like the dregs of wine. There was both contusion and suffusion of the brain. His breathing was slow, and some spasmodic movements of the muscles agitated his face. I felt his pulse. It was intermittent. The extremities of the body were growing cold already, and I saw death must inevitably ensue. After dressing the unfortunate man's wounds, I readjusted the bandages on his head and turned to Captain Nemo.
What caused this wound?
What does it signify?
He replied evasively.
A shock has broken one of the levers of the engine, which struck myself. But your opinion to his state?
I hesitated before giving it.
You may speak. This man does not understand French.
I gave a last look at the wounded man.
He will be dead in 2 hours.
Can nothing save him?
Nothing.
Captain Nemo's hand contracted, and some tears glistened in his eyes, which I thought incapable of shedding any. For some moments, I still watched the dying man, whose life ebbed slowly. His pallor increased under the electric light that was shed over his deathbed. I looked at his intelligent forehead, furrowed with premature wrinkles, produced probably by misfortune and sorrow. I tried to learn the secret of his life from the last words that escaped his lips.
You can go now, Monsieur ARONNAX.
I left him in the dying man's cabin and returned to my room, much affected by this scene. During the whole day, I was haunted by uncomfortable suspicions, and at night I slept badly, and between my broken dreams I fancied I heard distant sighs like the notes of a funeral psalm. Were they the prayers of the dead, murmured in that language that I could not understand? The next morning I went on to the bridge. Captain Nemo was there before me. As soon as he perceived me, he came to me.
Professor, will it be convenient to you to make a submarine excursion today?
With my companions.
If they like.
We obey your orders, Captain.
Will you be so good, then, as to put on your cork jackets?
It was not a question of dead or dying. I rejoined Ned Land and Conseil and told them of Captain Nemo's proposition. Conseil hastened to accept it, and this time the Canadians seemed quite willing to follow our example. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. At 8:30 we were equipped for this new excursion and provided with 2 contrivances for light and breathing. The double door was open, and, accompanied by Captain Nemo, who was followed by a dozen of the crew, we set foot, at a depth of about 30 feet, on the solid bottom on which the Nautilus rested. A slight declivity ended in an uneven bottom at 15 fathoms depth. This bottom differed entirely from the one I had visited on my first excursion under the waters of the Pacific Ocean. Here, there was no fine sand, no submarine prairies, no sea forest. I immediately recognized that marvelous region in which, on that day, the captain did the honors to us. It was the Coral Kingdom. Chance had thrown me just by the most precious specimens of the zoophyte. This coral was more valuable than that found in the Mediterranean, on the coasts of France, Italy, and Barbary. Its tints justified the poetical names of flower of blood and froth of blood that trade has given to its most beautiful productions. Coral was sold for £20 per ounce, and in this place the watery beds would make the fortunes of a company of coral divers. This precious matter, often confused with other plopi, formed then the inextricable plots called Macchiota, and on which I noticed several beautiful specimens of pink coral. At last, after walking 2 hours, we had attained a depth of about 300 yards, that is to say, the extreme limit on which coral begins to form. But there was no isolated bush, nor modest brushwood at the bottom of lofty trees. It was an immense forest of large mineral vegetations, enormous petrified trees, united by garlands of elegant sea bindweed, all adorned with clouds and reflections. We passed freely under their high branches, lost in the shade of the waves. Captain Nemo had stopped. I and my companions halted, and, turning round, I saw his men were forming a semicircle round their chief. Watching attentively, I observed that the 4 of them carried on their shoulders an object of an oblong shape. We occupied in this place the center of a vast glade surrounded by the lofty foliage of the submarine forest. Our lamps threw over this place a sort of clear twilight that singularly elongated the shadows on the ground. At the end of the glade, the darkness increased and was only relieved by little sparks reflected by the points of coral. Ned Land and Conseil were near me. We watched, and I thought I was going to witness a strange scene. On observing the ground, I saw that it was raised in certain places by slight excrescences encrusted with limy deposits and disposed with a regularity that betrayed the hand of man. In the midst of the glade, on a pedestal of rocks roughly piled up, stood a cross of coral that extended its long arms that one might have thought were made of petrified blood. Upon a sign from Captain Nemo, one of the men advanced, and at some feet from the cross he began to dig a hole with a pickaxe that he took from his belt. I understood all. This glade was a cemetery, this hole a tomb, this oblong object the body of the man who had died in the night. The captain and his men had come to bury their companion in this general resting place at the bottom of this inaccessible ocean. The grave was being dug slowly. The fish fled on all sides while their retreat was being thus disturbed. I heard the strokes of the pickaxe, which sparked when it hit upon some flint lost at the bottom of the waters. The hole was soon large and deep enough to receive the body. Then the bearers approached. The body, enveloped in a tissue of white linen, was lowered into the damp grave. Captain Nemo, with his arms crossed on his breast, and all the friends of him who had loved them, knelt in prayer. The grave was then filled in with the rubbish taken from the ground, which formed a slight mound. When this was done, Captain Nemo and his men rose. Then, approaching the grave, they knelt again, and all extended their hands in a sign of last adieu. Then the funeral procession returned to the Nautilus, passing under arches of the forest, in the midst of thickets, along the coral bushes, and still on the ascent. At last, the light of the ship appeared, and its luminous track guided us to the Nautilus. At 1 o'clock, we had returned. As soon as I had changed my clothes, I went up on the platform, and, a prey to conflicting emotions, I sat down near the binnacle. Captain Nemo joined me. I rose and said to him,
So, as I said he would, this man died in the night.
Yes, Monsieur ARONNAX.
And he rests now near his companions in the coral cemetery.
Yes, forgotten by all else, but not by us. We dug the grave, and the Poulps undertake to seal our dead for eternity.
and, burying his face quickly in his hands, he tried in vain to suppress a sob. Then he added,
Our peaceful cemetery is there, some 100 feet below the surface of the waves.
Your dead sleep quietly, at least, Captain, out of the reach of sharks.
Yes, sir. Of sharks and men.